Hey guys, Luton here. So this week we've been playing Mirror's Edge Catalyst, thanks to EA and DICE. They were hooking me up, and about 40 other people with codes for the closed beta. We were giving them away on the stream. Now this game has recently been pushed back to June to iron out some bugs and so forth. So what is Mirror's Edge Catalyst? How does it play? Well, probably many, if not all of you, are aware of Mirror's Edge as a futuristic free-running first-person game where you play as Faith, a courier and also slightly Lisbeth Salander-style character who works against a typically evil company who have wronged her past. There are some nice character tropes thrown in to help you along the way, a friendly but angry police chief style in the form of your guide, your sort of guy who's running the gang, the hapless new guy who thinks he's it and he deserves all the praise and he thinks he's running all the show, and of course the wise old guy with pigeons, and of course on top of that you've got the evil businessman, so you've really got the whole gang. Now, having not really played the original Mirror's Edge, the premise was not one that was tough to get your head around here. Faith comes out from some sort of futuristic timeout and is picked up by her friends who bring her back to continue with her career activities. As you go along with the main story, missions and events unfold, shedding light on her past and so on. It's pretty standard fare. Now, I think everyone would probably say that this isn't a particularly narrative heavy driven game. It's really more about the mechanics of the parkour style movement. I haven't seen this game all the way through. Maybe it gets super complicated, but from my mind it seems fairly sort of straightforward. When the original game came out, it was quite a new dynamic. It was really seen by many people, I guess, as a bit of an experimental project, especially considering its highly minimal art style. Catalyst builds upon this foundation in all respects. The greatest aspect for me of it is the fluid and intuitive way in which you move around Glass City. While your HUD will guide you, there are always multiple solutions to any route and not just lanes to follow, but completely separate routes which you can cross over, mesh together, just mix it up. This creates the feeling of choice and variety for you, which, if you consider your free running, is an important feeling to evoke from the player. Although there are sort of specific sections of this area, and sometimes, you can move around fairly free, but you might be limited to 2-3 different routes, sort of, and those can kind of cross over. It's more kind of about the difference in the way you approach things vertically and so on and so on. Let's talk a little bit about the combat in the game. So as you move through the narrative, you have the Kruger set guys who you have to basically battle and so on and so on. You can do some cool moves. You can kind of swing, kick, and blah, 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 and you can sort of punch and roll and dodge around them, kick them in the back, throw them off stuff, kind of, if you kick them towards the ledge. But overall, so far, from what we have played, the combat feels fairly straightforward. Also, you have guys with guns, but basically there's this thing where you keep your power up, you can avoid their bullets, which kind of doesn't make sense because you're not in the Matrix, but I suppose they wanted to sort of have that edge there and actually have guns in there. So I suppose if you want to suspend your disbelief, which is a phrase I seem to end up using more and more these days with games, where you kind of like, look, just let it go, all right. But yeah, that's kind of how it goes with the combat. But yeah, nothing especially challenging. There was this one guy who's like, he's going to be like the special guy, and he's like a bit tougher. Maybe the game gets much more difficult with the combat as it goes along, because obviously we're kind of playing the beta, we're playing the kind of more early stages, so maybe it does get more complex as it goes along. But so far it feels pretty straightforward, nothing too tricky. Again, I would hope that you can kind of toggle that and really push up the difficulty. Maybe the enemies take a lot more damage, so when you're facing like 3 or 4 guys, you actually really have to dodge around, move, jump off things, run away, get up. That's one thing you can do which is quite cool, is like run away, get on top of an object, jump off, drop kick them down, and that does a lot more damage to them, so that's quite cool. You have this mechanic where you don't have to just stand there fighting them. You can actually kind of run away, get on top of something, flip back and kick them, so that's quite a nice feeling to do. The art style, it's really gorgeous. As a designer, I really appreciate the limited colour palette used in the game. This gives strength to important highlights, such as guiding your routes through the game, but without it becoming overly garish or distracting from that environment. Now, that's something that's always a problem with beacons in games, is that it destroys the in-fiction immersion for you. Looking at something like recently Tomb Raider, games like this, that's always a problem. If Lara Croft is on a mountain in the back end of nowhere, why is that pot glowing fluorescent yellow? In a sci-fi game, this is easier to handle. Something like Dead Space, it makes complete sense as to why he would see objects highlighted or a directional path lit up and things like that. Mirror's Edge manages to sidestep this, as even though the fact that objects are highlighted bright red, for one, they nicely explain this right at the beginning of the game. Faith is wearing contacts that enable her to see all these graphic overlays in the real world. And secondly, the art style and setting are far more forgiving of such a mechanic because of that futuristic minimal style and the kind of accent colours you see everywhere. Aside from the narrative and general exploration aspect of the game, you also encounter time trials throughout the world. You can complete these for global ranking, and they are fairly addictive. Although once you've reached what you maybe feel is your absolute best possible run, you're probably going to then set that one aside and move on, so there's going to be some limitation there. This feature of the game does though lead us nicely into more critical points about the game, based purely obviously off the beta. Let's talk about those time trials. So, Faith can unlock new moves for both running, combat, and your gear. One of those moves is a leg lift designed to get you over objects more quickly. However, as people have quickly realised by doing this in repeated succession, objects to move over or not, it makes you move more quickly than just standard running. This enables people to achieve astonishingly fast times on time trials and missions alike, and to be fair, to get the top score you've still got to have a really perfect route and so on, but this is like the added benefit, which if you do not do this move, you would not be able to get those high scores. It also makes your character look like a demented kangaroo in the process. It is surprising to me that a glitch, if it even is a glitch and not just working as intended, would reach even the closed beta, as this seems something that's fairly fundamental. Given the game at no point instructs you that if you want to get around faster, then you should kind of bunny hop ad nauseum, I think it's safe to say that this is an unintended mechanic. You really would have expected this to be brought up by QA in early test stages, or certainly at alpha stages, if it is indeed unintended. I suppose the only argument in favour of the weird bunny hop method is that standard running, rolling and climbing would probably lead to extremely comparable times on the scoreboard, because if you've only got to do those basic moves, a lot of people are going to be getting those same times, whereas the hopping method is actually somewhat tricky to achieve smoothly across the entire time trial route, right? So maybe it is intended. I did reach out to DICE to ask if it's genuine or not, but I got no reply. So putting this aside, the time trial aspect is actually very enjoyable for me, at least. I always like things like that. I get very, I've always enjoyed games and hobbies where self-betterment is the goal. A nice bonus is when you go sailing past your friends, when you crack that combination of moves to get a perfect run. Just in the beta, me, Super, and Fuse already had a few of the courses where we had a bit of time battles going on. However, as I say, after maybe only 2 to 3 days, once you have cracked what feels like to be your very best time, it's unlikely you're going to go back, as I said before. So it does feel that it could be limited over time and not have a great longevity in that aspect. Similarly, I would imagine the overall narrative, which apparently I completed nearly 30% of in just the first few hours I played, seems a little concerning of how much story there is there. And then after that, what are you left with, However, as I have highlighted in the past, hours do not always equate to value. My favourite example being Firewatch, an incredibly short game for the money, but it was absolutely worth it. I feel that Catalyst feels very much into that category. When it comes to these time trials, these can be extended by players creating their own custom trials, but it has to be said that the ones I saw in the beta, I think having crappy human-created trials littered everywhere seems to be just the way of things. 2016, and basically everywhere I went there was just time trials, just littered all over the place. And they've actually said that this is quite an important aspect. If I click on Mirror's Edge Catalyst site, their update, and it says that taking on dashes designed by DICE, creating your own time trials, climbing the leaderboards, and connecting with your runner friends are some of the social play features we're really excited about and something we want to play flawlessly. Well, that's all very well and good for them to play flawlessly, but if the person that created them is an idiot, you just end up, like, I literally was running around and I was like, I'm going to try some of these custom-made time trials, and some of them were literally like 3 in a triangle, or one of them was like you jump over a rail and then jump up a wall and that's the end of it, and I was like, ugh, it's like there doesn't seem to be any kind of like guidance about this. I mean, it would be better maybe if you could just disable all of them except friends or something like this. I don't know. Maybe that was a feature. I didn't look too deep into the menu system, so maybe that is a feature. I'd have to double check on that. So what are they asking for the game? They're asking £30 for Mirror's Edge Catalyst. Now, as we know from various videos that I've made before, when we say, is it worth the money, What does that mean? Well, it's subjective. Judging from the beta alone, even despite the odd glitch and the concerningly short narrative, I think it's one that I would pick up. Why? Is it because DICE gave me a load of codes? No, it's because I love the art style, I love the freedom of movement and the generally high quality of the animation. It's a game that pulls you in, and despite stereotyped characters, it's a world in which I kind of want to know how the story turns out, and I think for that money I'd buy it and crack it and see what happens. I like the time trials. They gave me enough time to sort of get in and really play with them. I like the kind of freedom of movement and the sort of... It's kind of tricky to describe really, but it's this kind of like very fluid mechanic in which you kind of move over objects, and sort of it does have a really nice feel and vibe to it. I think the main thing is that there's just not many games out there which really replicate this. There are some other bits and pieces around, but most of those are games that I've already played. This is something new, and so it's just a game that I would like to try and play and, you know, have a good time with. In the meantime, though, if you don't want to wait until June as it is now for Mirror's Edge, I would actually also strongly recommend finding a good deal on Remember Me, which by now you can regularly find this game for next to nothing on a Steam sale, Humble sale, etc. This game also features kind of parkour style movement, but a third-person way, also in a futuristic world. The narrative feels considerably more developed in Remember Me. The environments are a stark opposite of Mirror's Edge. They're dark, they're Blade Runner-esque, and the combat is also a level above. Some battles actually feeling relatively challenging, especially the boss encounters. So guys, tell me your thoughts down below about Mirror's Edge Catalyst. Is this one you want to go to check out? There seems to be a fair amount of buzz about this, and I think even though the original Mirror's Edge was, because it was kind of out there, I think it didn't necessarily pick up straight away, but I think over time it's one of those games where people have sort of learned to appreciate what it was, and I think that sort of foundation has then sort of pushed forward into the next game, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot more kind of attention towards this one anyway. I find that myself. I actually own the original Mirror's Edge, but I never kind of got around to really sort of getting into it. I played it a little bit, but with this game I kind of feel much more like I sort of want to get on and get in the mix with it. So yeah, I'm looking to play it. Tell me if you are as well. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed, drop a like and stuff like that as always. I'll see you next time.